I should have kept driving. I should have ignored her. God, I should have just kept going. That's all I could think about as I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white with tension. The distant sound of the highway was fading now, and I was somewhere. I wasn't sure where. The last thing I remembered was her face, that strange, almost playful smile. But what came after? I couldn't tell anymore. Let me rewind. It was a long night, and I was driving back home from a business trip in the next state. My name's Jason, by the way. Mid-30s, married, 2 kids, working in sales. It was the same drive I'd taken a dozen times before, the highway mostly deserted except for the occasional truck. I liked driving at night, the quiet, the rhythm of the tires humming on the asphalt, the empty road ahead. But that night felt different. I kept glancing in my rearview mirror, feeling watched, even though the road behind me was empty. It was one of those feelings you can't shake, like the night itself had eyes. Around 2 a.m., as I passed through a stretch of highway surrounded by woods, I saw her. At first, I thought it was a deer or maybe some drunk stumbling out onto the road. But then, as I slowed down to get a better look, I realized it was a woman. Young, maybe mid-20s. She stood in the middle of the highway, waving at me, her long black hair tangled in the wind, wearing what looked like a simple white dress. Her face was pale, and even though she was waving, something about her expression made my stomach twist. I know it sounds strange, but there was something seductive in the way she moved, like she was trying to lure me in. Part of me wanted to stop, to see if she needed help. The other part, it screamed at me to keep going, but I didn't listen. I slowed down, rolled down my window just a crack. "You need help?" I asked, my voice shaking more than I'd like to admit. She didn't say a word. She just smiled, her head tilting slightly to the side. There was something in her eyes, something wrong. My heart was racing, and in that moment I decided it was a mistake to stop. I hit the gas. As I sped away, I glanced back in the mirror, expecting to see her fading into the distance. But she wasn't there. She was gone, vanished, like she'd never been there in the first place. I tried to shake it off, chalk it up to a trick of the light or my tired mind playing games. But then, just a few miles down the road, there she was again. Standing in the middle of the highway waving. Same smile, same empty eyes. This time I didn't stop. I swerved around her, my tires screeching as I nearly lost control. When I looked back in the mirror, she was still there, standing motionless in the center of the road, watching me drive away. Now I was scared. Really scared. I turned on the radio, hoping the noise would drown out my thoughts, but the static only made things worse. I couldn't focus. My heart was pounding. Every time I looked in the mirror, I half expected to see her again, and then she was in my backseat. I nearly drove off the road. Her reflection was clear as day, sitting right behind me, smiling that same eerie smile. I slammed on the brakes, spinning the car to a stop. When I whipped around, the backseat was empty. I sat there, breathing heavily, trying to convince myself I was imagining things. But it didn't feel like a hallucination. It felt real. Too real. That's when the car died. The engine sputtered and went silent, leaving me stranded in the middle of the highway, surrounded by nothing but darkness. I got out of the car, my hands shaking, and started walking. I don't know why. Maybe I thought I could outrun her, outrun whatever was happening to me. But the moment my feet hit the pavement, I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, deliberate. I turned, and there she was, standing just a few feet away. This time, she wasn't waving. She was just staring. I ran. But no matter how fast I went, I could hear her footsteps keeping pace, always just behind me. I didn't stop running until I saw headlights approaching in the distance. A trucker. I waved frantically, desperate for help. The truck slowed, the driver rolled down his window, and I babbled something about the girl on the road. But when I looked back, she was gone again. The trucker must have thought I was crazy, but he offered me a ride to the nearest gas station anyway. I took it, not daring to look back. Now, sitting here at the gas station, I can't shake the feeling that she's still out there, watching, waiting. I don't know if she's real or if I'm just losing my mind. But one thing's for sure, if you ever see a girl waving at you in the middle of the highway at night, keep driving. It all started earlier that evening. I just wrapped up another draining week of work. Traveling sales has a way of getting under your skin. Constant movement, lonely highways, and countless hours on the road with nothing but your thoughts. I'm Jake, 34, and for as long as I've been doing this job, I've come to appreciate the emptiness of these night drives. They clear my head, or at least they used to. I was about 3 hours into the drive home, well past sunset, and I could feel exhaustion settling in. You know how it goes. The radio was acting up, crackling between stations before cutting to static, then silence, then back again. My GPS started glitching too, losing signal every few miles, making me second guess whether I was even on the right road. I chalked it all up to being out in the middle of nowhere. Then, out of nowhere, a deer bolted across the road. Now, that's not exactly unusual out here. I've had more close calls with deer than I'd like to admit. But this one, it was different. Its eyes reflected my headlights in a way that made my skin crawl. Too bright, too unnatural. It darted off before I could get a good look, but something about it felt off, like I'd just seen something I wasn't supposed to. Shaking it off, I kept driving, trying to focus on the road. That's when I saw her. A girl, standing alone on the side of the highway. She was wearing this flowing white dress, her dark hair hanging in her face, and she was waving her arms like she was in desperate need of help. It was instinct, really. I slowed down. I mean, who wouldn't? She looked young, vulnerable, lost, maybe. But as soon as I eased off the gas, something in my gut screamed at me to stop. I rolled the window down just a crack and called out, "You all right? Do you need help?" She barely whispered over the sound of the wind. "Please, please help me." Her voice was soft, shaky. But what unsettled me wasn't her voice. It was her eyes. They kept flicking toward the trees, like she was afraid of something out there, or someone. That's when I saw them. Shadows. There were figures moving between the trees, low, crouched, watching. My stomach twisted into knots. This wasn't just some girl needing a ride. This was something else, a setup, a trap. I slammed my foot on the gas, speeding past her. As I glanced in the rearview mirror, my blood turned to ice. Her face wasn't pleading anymore. Her eyes had gone dark, cold, and a sick smirk curled on her lips. She wasn't scared. She was expecting me. My heart pounded in my chest as I raced down the highway. What the hell just happened? Who were those people in the trees? And more importantly, what was that girl? My mind was racing with questions, but none of them had answers that I wanted to face. After what felt like hours of white-knuckling the wheel, I saw a gas station up ahead. My hands were trembling as I pulled in, desperate for a moment to breathe, to collect myself. But the place was eerily quiet. No cars, no people. The fluorescent lights above flickered as I stepped out of the car, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. That's when I saw them again. The girl. And this time she wasn't alone. 3 men stood with her near the pumps, just standing there, watching the road, watching me. I ducked behind my car, my heart hammering so hard I thought they might hear it. It was a setup. They had been waiting for me all along. The girl was just bait. I crouched there, trying to steady my breath, trying to figure out how to get out of this. But what if they'd already seen me? What if I was too late? Peeking over the hood, I saw her face again. Blank, emotionless, like she was just going through the motions. The men with her weren't moving, but their eyes were scanning the lot like they were searching for something. Or someone. Me. I knew I couldn't stay hidden forever. Timing was everything. I waited until they looked away and bolted back to the driver's seat. My hands were shaking so badly, I nearly dropped the keys. The moment the engine roared to life, they all turned toward me. Without thinking, I floored it, the tires screeching as I tore out of the gas station. I couldn't stop glancing in the rear view. They didn't chase me. They just stood there watching as I drove off. The girl's dark eyes locked on mine until she disappeared into the night. Who were they? What did they want? And most terrifying of all, what was that girl? She wasn't human. I could feel it in my bones. No normal person has eyes like that. I didn't stop driving until I was well out of town. Not until the lights of the city came into view, and I knew I was safe. But even now, long after that night, I still can't shake the feeling that I narrowly escaped something far worse than I'll ever understand. And that smirk, That final look she gave me. It haunts me. There was something behind her eyes. Something wrong. Something not of this world. Was she even real? Or was my mind unraveling under the weight of exhaustion and fear? I'll never know for sure, but I thank God I didn't stop that night. I'm not sure I would have made it out if I had.